Hello and welcome to Express Media's National Young Writers Month. I'm Fiona Dunn, creative producer of Express Media. Tonight we're celebrating the launch of the 2015 Scribe Nonfiction Prize for Young Writers, and to help us celebrate, we have Briohny Doyle and Robbie Arnott joining us. So Briohny Doyle is a Melbourne-based writer. She was the co-winner of the 2013 Scribe Prize, and her first non-fiction book, adult fantasy, My Search for True Maturity in an Age of Mortgages, Marriages and Other Adult Milestones, which is a fantastic title, has been acquired by Scribe Publications. She's published essays and short fiction in Going Down Swinging, Meandrin, Ampersand, and you can read her monthly column in The Lifted Brow. With us also tonight is Robbie Arnott, who is a Tasmanian-based writer. He won our Scribe Nonfiction Prize in 2014 for Birds and Knives and Not Talking About It, and his work has been published in Kill Your Darlings, Ireland, Visible Ink, and the Review of Australian Fiction, as well as Seizure. Also in 2014, he had a pretty good year, and he was runner-up in the 2014 Erica Bell Foundation for Literature Award. Welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Fiona.
I'm very glad to have you as part of the 2015 Scribe Nonfiction Prize and to give us all the background and all of your knowledge after winning the prize. So I guess to start off, could you tell us a bit about yourself and the writing that you do?
After you, Briohny.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I guess my writing practice comes in a number of different modes, and I write non-fiction by way of kind of critical essay, I suppose. And fiction also, and some poetry sometimes. And I'm also a casual academic, and I've just come out of a year of a PhD, so I guess my writing practice for a long time has been kind of academic. Yep.
Excellent. Over to you, Robbie.
I was pretty bad at academic writing when I was a youth. I'm terrible at poetry. I mostly try and write fiction, and that's what I usually focus on, but occasionally it ends up being non-fiction when I realise I'm pretty much just basing characters on myself or something else. And I think it's habitual to write non-fiction, and occasionally I'll write an essay or a critique or something like that. But I normally start with fiction.
We might get back to that strange relationship between fiction and non-fiction a little bit later, but could you give us some background about the work that you did win the Scribe Prize with? So Robbie, Birds and Knives and Not Talking About It, and Briohny, I Don't Know, The Impossibilities of Marriage in the 21st Century, which were both fantastic.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay, your turn now, Robbie. Go first. Take it in turns.
At the time of writing it, I was really interested in, and I'm still really interested in masculinity in Australia and how it's represented through particular relationships between men and ways it can be expressed and ways it can't be expressed. I think it's quite fertile territory for literature. And I started exploring that by writing a self-focused essay about being obsessed with knives as a child. And I thought it was a bit of a weird idea, and I'd see how it'd go, because I talked to a few other people about it, and they said, yeah, that's weird, you were weird. And I thought, well, weird's good. So I wrote about that for a while and extended out a longer piece, and to do across a variety of different time zones and instances, and it was a loosely linked collection of stories, basically. And I submitted a Scribe Prize because I thought it might be okay, and yeah, I won. So I still think it was a bit of a fluke. But yeah, basically I started by thinking about masculinity and how the different ways that can be expressed, particularly through symbols of violence and strength and all those sorts of things that are a little bit outdated, and it all happened from there.
Wonderful. And Briohny, can you talk about your essay on marriage and the idea of marriage and how you came to write it?
Okay, so yeah, as I said when we were pre-hangout chatting, I did write that essay for the Scribe Prize. So it was the first year that the Scribe Prize existed, and when I saw it, I thought, well, I would like to put something in for that. So I had a short list of topics that I was going to write about, and I chose that one based on the fact that it was quite topical, still is kind of topical, but was extremely topical at that point. And yeah, just was something that I felt that I could relate to personally, and also I suppose a bit of a cheat. Because it wasn't going to be something that I would have to heavily research, given the time restrictions of writing something that you know isn't going to be published. It doesn't have a place to be published, and so you're writing it for a prize that kind of curtails the sort of project that you pick, I think.
And what were you hoping to get out of writing the piece, maybe beyond like winning the prize overall? What was your aim in writing the essay, specifically for the prize as well? Like, why not submit another piece of work that you had maybe in the drafts folder somewhere, or develop another piece for it?
Because I actually wrote it to kind of rehearse or practice a certain non-fiction mode, and yeah, so I didn't have anything sitting in a draft folder. I mean, I guess I tend to write things for things in general. So yeah, so if something's in a drafts folder, it's because it's going towards something else, like it's part of another idea. So I wish I had that kind of rotation of usable stuff sitting around, but no. Sorry, I'm really headachy and sick. I'm not going to deal with this.
No, that's okay. I should have mentioned to our listeners and our people tuning in, Briohny is actually incredibly ill, and so is Oliver tonight. So thank you so much for joining us when I'm sure you would rather be asleep and dosed up on Lemsip.
No, I'm fine. I am a little dosed up though, so I'm a bit vague. Yeah, I guess I chose that because I did want to rehearse this specific mode of writing nonfiction, and it was a topic that I felt that I could write about at that point. And it's not a very exciting background story, but I guess that was it.
Wonderful. And Robbie, how did you prepare your piece? Because you said before it was you kind of started out writing short stories, and what was the process of bringing it all together, and how did you kind of pick and choose what you were including?
Well, I guess the really important part was finding the core narrative thread to link all the little stories together, and making sure that even if they were interesting little pieces themselves, there was an underlying story and arc that held it all together. And I basically feel like I was a bit lucky to find one, because I found all these instances and there was this arc that held it all together. It happened with a few quite significant events, and that's how I found it, because I fiddled around with it for a very long time trying to figure out if there was any greater meaning to it or if it was more than the sum of its parts. And yeah, after a lot of thinking about it and a lot of writing out lots of really bad stuff, I got there. But yeah, it's not always like that. Often, sometimes I'll try and write something that has an arc like that, and it'll just fall off a cliff somewhere. So, yeah.
And what's been the process of working with Scribe on your winning entry since?
They've been really cool. They've essentially asked me to see if I can turn it into something book length, which I'm trying to do at the moment. And
wonderful.
Deep into the process of doing, and they've been really, really supportive and giving me a lot of editorial feedback, and I think they want to make it work, and that's really great. I've been met with the publishers a number of times, and they've been sending me lots of long, detailed emails with lots of critical feedback, which is terrifying and great at the same time. And yeah, I feel like I'm being really well looked after, so that's great, because I used to be terrified of editors. So.
Well, that's very good to come out of it, because there is 10 hours of editorial mentorship involved, and then the relationship, I guess, has continued for both of you with Scribe. And Briohny, would you be able to tell us a little bit about the book that you have coming out, Adult Fantasy, and how that kind of came to be after the Scribe Prize, and also kind of developing it for Scribe and what you've been doing over the past couple months, and what's the plan until we see it?
Well, yeah, I mean, the plan is that I need to write it. Yeah, I am really supported by Scribe, and that's been really great, and I have just been kind of plotting, and I've got a couple of drafts of chapters. I guess it came out of the essay that I wrote for the prize, insofar as similar to Robbie, they were talking about we should develop that essay, and I think in the end I just decided that I didn't have it in me to develop that essay into a book-length work, that it was actually part of something else, some broader thinking that I was doing about adulthood rather than just talking about marriage in particular. It was going to be too difficult. So that's how it came out of that essay.
How interesting. And because as well, you mentioned, I remember reading it, and you mentioned in there that you were writing a book. And was that the same book that you were writing? And if that was the case, was the Scribe Prize kind of a chance to show what you have and to show that you do have a book within you?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really cynical, doesn't it? But I guess so.
No, not at all. Not at all. And in both of your stories, they're both really deeply personal work. So in Briohny, you're talking about marriage, using your own relationships, and then Robbie, you're obviously talking about your life experiences in portraying masculinity and the relationships that men do and don't have. So why were these stories so important for you to tell, and how did they kind of originate when you began thinking about your entries for the Scribe Prize?
Okay. Essentially, I was using it as a way to try and understand something I don't really understand very well. So I didn't come at it as a way of trying to explain something like an opinion piece or something like that. It was more seeking to understand a few of the stranger relationships I'd had and I noticed other people having with other men in their lives. And that was really my approach towards it, trying to track it down that way, really in an exploratory way, and trying to discover things through it and lay the situations out there quite bare and with as much emotion as I could to try and create a story like that. As I was doing, writing as an authority wouldn't have worked because I'm not one, and also I don't know anyone who is.
And is it in that way that you've also spoken about marriage, Briohny, because you're also a marriage celebrant, and though like you obviously take part in marriage ceremonies every day, but considering those implications for you in your personal life, what was kind of the process of identifying that and working yourself into that narrative as well?
Yeah, so I think what Robbie said is spot on about using writing and especially like kind of injecting a self-reflexive or like an eye into your non-fiction writing as a way to work something out, because it kind of allows you to show you're working out in a very real way as opposed to kind of gathering your evidence and then putting on your like fake objective voice, which I think like a lot of us at this time feel quite uncomfortable with for very good reasons. Yeah, in terms of the marriage piece, like, yeah, it was something that I had been thinking about and having a lot of conflicted thinking, so that essay was like, working a way of working out where to stand by this issue and thinking about it in different terms and kind of examining the conflicts in that. But in the end, like, I didn't want to develop it because actually, like, I didn't want to put my relationship under that much scrutiny, and in the end, I didn't even want to put my own feelings on this issue under that much scrutiny as well. So, I mean, I guess it's a double-edged sword. Like, you want to kind of work yourself into the things that you're thinking about and the things that you're passionate about, the things that are affecting your life, but at the same rate, like, you don't want to expose yourself and the people that you love to such a degree that it actually, affects your life too much.
Yeah, and that was also something I was going to ask as well, because obviously your partner was very involved in that story, but Robbie as well, you have a lot of childhood friends and family within the story, and how did you deal with speaking and writing about them, and was there, I guess, kind of any backlash, or what ethical considerations were kind of put into your writing?
Well, I didn't reveal any of the identities of my friends other than by a simple letter. If they read it, they would know it was them, and none of them were particularly annoyed with me who have read it. I understand, because I only portrayed just simple facts. Family were a bit pissed off, not so much because they think I misrepresented them, but simply because, and this I think could affect a lot of people writing about members of their family, in that you're telling not only your story, but it's their story as well. And I'm from a reasonably conservative family, and they're very proud of me, but they essentially think, why am I telling people this? Why am I not just writing a novel? I think my dad wants me to write the next Wilbur Smith novel. So yeah, it's tricky, and it hasn't damaged the relationship badly, but they just don't seem to understand why I would tell anyone this. It's not anyone else's business. So it's a fine line to balance. I'm still working it out.
That's really interesting. And they haven't put a blanket ban on you writing about family, because I know a couple of writers whose family have just said to them, no, you are not ever allowed to write about us, which I always find really interesting and really, I guess, grating as a writer, because you do draw so much from your relationships in the world around you for your writing.
Yeah, no, they haven't done that, and it's really nice of them, and they're way more generous with me than they should be. But they've also sneakily done something that's put a bit of pressure on me by saying, no, it's okay, we trust you. We trust that you want. Yeah, so that's it's very nice. Yeah.
So that's a bit of weight on your shoulders for whatever you're writing about them next.
Well, I'm not writing about them, but they crop up every now and then. And I think the trick I'm finding is to be as honest as I can, and to be completely brutally honest with myself. So it makes it easier if you're the dick in the story. That makes everything a bit better.
That's a pretty good piece of advice.
Yeah. I'm not saying exaggerate your actions, but if you've been a dick, fess up to it and turn the torch on yourself.
A lot of that self-deprecating humour and complete honesty. That sounds fantastic, and I'm sure a couple of people will be taking that advice when they're working up their entries for this year's Scribe Nonfiction Prize. So you mentioned before that you both sort of straddle the worlds of fiction as well as nonfiction. I wanted to ask, what do you think nonfiction can offer that fiction just can't? Briohny, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I mean, I just think that, I don't know, like those are two modes that are both very different and also really similar. Especially the way I deal with them, like, I guess.
What do you think the similarities are?
Well, I mean that they're written, that they're composed. I mean, all nonfiction is composed to a certain degree, and anyone who tells you that it's not needs a dubious eye cast on them, I think. So in that way, like the process of writing nonfiction or the process of writing fiction are very similar. I mean, you can't make up your characters in nonfiction, but you kind of do to a certain degree anyway, because you need to emphasize certain things in order to make your point, and it's your point that you're making. It's not, the truth or whatever, or I don't see it that way anyway. Yeah.
And do you think there's been a blurring of the boundaries between nonfiction and nonfiction in recent years?
Certainly. I mean, I don't know enough about the history of writing, I guess, to kind of pinpoint specific trends, but I definitely think that we are troubled by the position of objectivity, and we have been, for the past few decades at least.
And what do you think, Robbie?
Yeah, I agree with the objectivity thing. And I guess basically I think a story is a story. And if it's a good story and it deserves to be told, I don't think it matters if it's fiction or non-fiction. And in any case, non-fiction is always going to be blurry because everyone remembers things differently. My non-fiction won't be someone else's non-fiction. So I think the most important thing is whether the story stands up and whether it punches you in the guts or rips the air out of your lungs. And yeah, so I think the line is blurring a bit, but I think it's always been blurry. It's easier to compartmentalize things into genres and it makes it easier to understand. But yeah, I agree. I don't think it matters.
And I guess in that sense as well, you obviously, like I've read work of yours before, such as the Drone Report, which was published in Seizure a little while back, and that was also a complete blend of fiction and non-fiction in really clear juxtaposition between political, everyday Tony Abbott's actions and the way he's buying weapons and kind of mythical Norse. I guess what you've written is fiction, but obviously drawing on Norse mythology quite a bit. But what do you think fiction can contribute in a non-fiction piece, and how do you think it makes us rethink about what you're trying to tell us through your non-fiction work?
I think where fiction can come in particularly handy when paired with non-fiction is the way it can stretch your imagination and the way you can enhance or minimalise scenarios, and as well as juxtaposition and things like using allegory to show a real-world scenario in a different light, and I think that can be really powerful. And as for the seizure thing, someone asked me earlier whether or not the Tony Abbott stuff I wrote about was fiction, and that's not true. Like you don't need to make up fiction about what he does.
Yeah.
I think they complement it really well in ways of just shining a light on each other.
That sounds fantastic, and if anyone does want to read it, you can Google The Drone Report and Seizure or Robbie Arnott's name and it will pop up. It's a fantastic read and is free on the website. So what kind of responsibilities do you think you have to a reader as a writer of nonfiction?
To the reader? Well, I guess it's not misrepresenting things, I suppose, is the big one. But other than that, I mean, the responsibility to the reader is not great. I don't think. I mean, you don't lie to them, but beyond that, it's up to them whether they want to read your work or not. So having a responsibility to them is like, I don't know that I feel that I do.
Do you ever think about the reader in what you're writing, or?
Yeah, I guess. Like, I guess that I do, but not in terms of me wanting to like take on some duty of care for them. Yeah.
And what about you, Robbie?
So with responsibility, I kind of have a funny relationship with it. On one hand, I feel a bit like I'm an adult. I can do what I want. And on the other hand, I feel like I have a real responsibility if I'm going to have something published to not be boring and not be expected. And so that's kind of why I wrote that seizure piece the way I did. And I don't think that everything has to be wildly entertaining, but I think if I'm going to ask someone to take their time to read something that I've written, I want to shake them around a little bit and make them think a bit differently, or at least have a good time. So that's the only real responsibility I can think of if I'm going to go out of my way to throw words in their face. But other than that, I think the responsibility you have is more to the story than the reader. I think you have to, if you've got a good story and you believe in it, you have to make it as great as you can.
And in terms of writing nonfiction, both of you wrote quite intensely personal stories, but what kind of degree of research do you do when you are writing nonfiction, and what is that process?
Usually I write like critical essays about texts, I suppose. Like my column in the Lifted Brow that's where most of my nonfiction has been, and it's usually about texts. So in that sense, I haven't done up until now in the research for this project, I haven't done like a lot of interviews or anything like that. So it's kind of falls into that category of like looking at the text, thinking about it, thinking about how it relates to what else is going on around you and potentially what's going on in your life that might support that and help you get your point across. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't. I agree with all that, but I'm not really much. I'm the wrong guy to ask when it comes to about interviews and sources and things like that, because I haven't really done much of that, and I doubt I'd be good at it. But mostly, something that can really help is just like giving yourself a bullshit check, like a bullshit-o-meter. Like, do I believe it? Is this believable? Is this a load of crap? And running that through is people you can check against, because often if you're writing a personal thing and you're trying to convey an emotion you had or a scenario that happened, often you'll exaggerate that without even realizing you're doing it, or you're kind of subconsciously doing it to heighten the scenario or enhance the story. So it's good to go away and headbutt a wall or play with a kitten or something, and then come back and give it a bullshit check.
That sounds pretty good. And just the kitten before, has the kitten come into the room? Because you mentioned before that you just adopted a new stray kitten and there might be a cameo tonight.
No,
that's okay. That's all right. We might keep you here for the moment. I was also wondering, I want to cast both of your brains back to when you discovered that you were shortlisted for the prize after entering and waiting and waiting and waiting. First of all, was your entry one of the last-minute scramble on a Sunday night type entries to get it in, or had you got it in a lot earlier and made those considerations? Robbie?
The latter. Sorry.
I submitted way early. I normally don't when I'm submitting to competitions or magazines. I'm normally deadline, but I managed to, because I've been working on this piece for quite a long time, and then I was stressing about it, getting all sweaty. So I just submitted it to get it out of the way. And then I didn't forget about it, but because I'd entered the year before and hadn't been shortlisted, I didn't have as much hopes. I just kind of thought, yeah, okay, that's gone. And then I had a few other things going on. I moved cities and things, and I got an email saying I was shortlisted, and I had to blink a few times. I couldn't quite believe it.
Especially as well, you were both on very competitive shortlists. The Scribe Prize has actually been quite competitive in the past 2 years that we run it. But what was the realization that you were with the writers that you were up against, and did you go and Google their names immediately and see their writing, or what was your reaction when you found out who was on the shortlist?
I don't know who to talk. I wanted to talk.
Right, you start us off.
Okay,
sorry, I should probably ask you directly and say your name, but that's okay.
Yeah, it was a few years ago now, but I think I probably Googled the people that I was up against. Other than Oliver, I don't think that they were people that I just knew automatically, whereas this year's, or the one that you won, Robbie, I knew a lot of people on that list, and that was a tough list. That was an amazing list.
I know, they're awesome.
Yeah.
I only know one of them. I know Sam Twyford Moore a little bit, And I saw his name and I was like, okay, sweet, I'm not going to win, I'm out of here. And then I Googled everyone else's and then I just got more scared because they're all so good. And I don't know any of them because I don't really feel like I'm very much part of the young writing scene, probably just because I live in Hobart. And they all seem to be friends with each other and they're all talking about it on the internet. And I just got really intimidated and they all had their own websites. I don't have a website. And I just gave up because they're all so good. So, yeah, it just freaked me out.
But then you got a call to say that you'd won, which is excellent.
Yeah.
And you came up for the awards, the Express Media Awards, where the Scribe publication is awarded every year, which is very exciting. And just besides, after kind of Googling and going, oh my God, who are all these people, I just want to ask as well, who do you think are the best nonfiction writers in Australia, and who do you maybe look to as your peers and also as your role models for your writing?
Me or Briohny?
I'm going to leave it with you, Robbie.
Okay. So there's lots of non-fiction writers, in particular around Australia. I think are great. I just read an essay in the latest Kill Your Darlings, The Lifted Brow, which Briohny was in. Her thing was really good too. Read that. But also, there's this great essay by Sam George Allen, who I don't know, but it was amazing. It was this incredible essay about, her life or the time she spent working in a strip bar, basically, as a waitressy thing. It was incredible, and I wish I'd written something like that. So I think Sam George Allen is amazing. I really like reading Rebecca Harkins Cross and her reviews. I think she writes some of the best reviews of just about anything. She does all sorts of stuff. I think she's fantastic. I really like Waleed Ali. I'll read most things he writes. Apart from that, I like Benjamin Law stuff. I think everyone likes Benjamin Law, don't they? I mean,
we certainly like him here at Express.
Yeah. I mostly read fiction, but I'm trying to think of some others. Again, Sam Twyford Moore writes some wonderful things. So does Sam Cooney. I read a thing of his the other day.
Wonderful. So a couple of writers for us to go on from there if you haven't read the works of them before. And we'll get a couple of those up on the website as well, and examples. Briohny, do you have any writers that you really love and admire in terms of nonfiction in Australia?
Yeah, I guess I totally second all of Robbie's choices there, and I suppose that it does kind of highlight how there is a pretty dynamic younger group of scene of people writing nonfiction at the moment. His list is excellent, and I would also add, I always read anything that Rebecca Giggs writes. She's excellent. So I feel like there's a lot of younger people doing long-form nonfiction at the moment, which is pretty exciting in Australia.
And what do you think has contributed to that resurgence in younger people specifically doing creative nonfiction?
I guess on one level, I think that nonfiction is more popular than fiction at the moment, or there's a resurgence in popularity for fiction. And I guess emerging writers are shrewd, and we go where there is an opportunity to go, and so therefore you'll write the stuff that is more likely to get published. I think essentially, but I also think that this kind of like troubling of objectivity also applies to fiction just as much. I think that we're seeing a troubling of certain modes of fiction writing, and that nonfiction can be a way to kind of escape them as well.
Wonderful. And I just wanted to ask as well, because besides there's a $15 cash prize, that'd be a little bit flimsy. It's a $1,500 cash prize and editorial time with Scribe Publications. But part of the prize is also a subscription to Scribe's nonfiction releases, which you guys get each month. And I was wondering, have these been useful in developing your work and seeing what other writing is out there? And have you been discovering new writers, or were you well across it? What's your reading list been like?
It's awesome. I probably shouldn't say this because they say on the prize that they only send you one book, but I get this giant bag of books delivered every month. It's awesome. It's so good. So I might get in trouble for telling you about that. But yeah, that's great. And it's been fantastic because I've got to read all these wonderful non-fiction and fiction books that I hadn't read before. So they sent me Behind the Beautiful Forevers by Catherine Boo, which is just stunning, and a couple of David Finkel books, and a few new release fictions, and some a great novel by a guy called Chigozie Obioma called The Fisherman. I think it's just come out, and that's brilliant. So it's been great. I need new bookshelves. A really good problem. Oh, I forgot to mention one more writer that I meant to say. Elmo Keep. I don't know Elmo or what gender Elmo is, but I read this amazing essay that they wrote on the human planned trip to Mars late last year on medium.com, and that was fantastic. So that's another one to look out for.
Wonderful.
Sorry,
we'll get that up as well. And what about you, Briohny? Has reading the other work that Scribe has been publishing contributed to your writing?
Yeah. I mean, the year that I won the prize and subsequently got all these books in the post every month was my final year of my PhD. So at the very time that it was happening, when the books arrived each month, I've got to say that I was kind of like, oh my God, more reading, I can't handle it all. But since I finished last year, I have been going through those books, and yeah, I got some of the same titles, Behind the Beautiful Forevers. The Wonder Woman book that they've got out is amazing.
Oh, I got that too. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And there was I can't remember all the titles. I read one about food that was really interesting, and I was also kind of reading at the end of last year with this book in mind, kind of thinking about different voices in nonfiction and the impact that these kind of different voices have on how we interpret the author's intent and the story.
Wonderful. I will definitely go out now and buy a couple of those books. They sound amazing. And lastly, just to finish us up, what advice do you have to young nonfiction writers who might be thinking about entering the Scribe Prize this year? Briohny, can you start us off?
Okay, well, my advice always is like, know when you, for prizes or competition or publication or anything like that, is to know what the people publish. So, go to your bookshop and read Scribe titles and have a look, and read past winners of the prize. And I think that's the same if you're submitting to VoiceWorks or if you're submitting to anything. Like, you need to know the kind of stuff that they publish, and then think about if you've got anything that can correlate with their idea and your idea, like a happy medium in a way. Yeah.
Excellent. And Robbie?
I normally don't
Besides getting it on time?
Because it's dangerous coming from me. But find a story that just, will punch someone in the guts and commit to it. Really, really, if you've got a story that you're not that sure about, or you want to tell something you're not that committed to, find something else. Just find something that's going to absolutely knock someone's socks off. And I think that's always the best place to start. Have something like a story that you just can't wait to tell your friends about, or you feel like people need to hear. And then go from there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight and tuning in for our National Young Writers Month event to launch the 2015 Scribe Prize for Young Nonfiction Writers. A huge thank you to Briohny Doyle for giving up their time tonight, especially with Briohny being so sick. And if you want to find out more from our guests today, as Robbie mentioned before, you don't have a website, and I believe you don't have Twitter. So I'm just going to say...
I've got a Twitter. I got one.
Oh, fantastic. What is the handle? Tell the world your handle.
Oh, geez, I don't know. It's like my name, I think, Robbie Arnott.
Okay.
I'm so bad.
We might tweet that for people later if you can send it through. Otherwise, you can keep an eye out for his name in what I'm sure will be all of your favourite publications. And Briohny, you can follow Briohny on Twitter at Briohny Doyle, BRIONHNYDOYLE. To check out what she is doing and to keep up to date with her book coming out in 2017. If you've missed the beginning of our broadcast, the whole conversation is now live on YouTube, so you can jump online and catch up. Also head to the website and check out all the submission details for the 2015 Scribe Nonfiction Prize for Young Writers. They are all there. If you need any more advice from Briohny or Robbie, let us know. They are a complete wealth of advice, being our past winners, and have gone on to do such great things. Entries for the competition close at 9 a.m. on Monday, the 24th of August, so make sure you don't sleep in and you do get those entries in. In the meantime, you can keep up to date with the National Young Writers Month blog on the Express Media website at www.expressmedia.org.au and check out the Twitter hashtag NYWM15. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We will see you again very soon. We can't wait to talk more about Scribe with you. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.